Sure.
What college did you go to?
For undergrad, for law school, you have to go to both college and law school. For my undergraduate degree, I went to Hofstra University, which is in the New York area. I grew up in the New York area. And then I went to law school at the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana. Yes.
Wait, so did you ever think about doing something other than law?
Practicing. Yeah, that's a good question. And that's one of the things you should always keep in mind. When I was in college, I thought of possibly being a teacher. I was thinking of being a high school teacher at one time. I also thought of becoming an accountant. But I really liked the law. I like practicing the idea of reading cases. Yeah.
What made you interested in business?
In business, yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. When I graduated from law school, which was a long, long time ago, 1979, I didn't know exactly what area of law I was going to go into because I was the first person in my family. I decided my family to graduate from college, let alone be a lawyer. So I didn't have anybody who was telling me, what I should do or not do. So it was a brand new thing to me, and I was lucky in some respects in that. When I was attending Notre Dame, when I was a third-year law student, law school is 3 years after you go to college for 4, I was recruited by my law firm, a law firm was Jones Day, which is now a huge international law firm where I spent almost my entire career. I left for 2 years back in around 2002 to 2004. I became a general counsel of a real estate brokerage company called Remax International. I was out in Denver for 2 years, but I came back. But the way I ended up in a more business-oriented practice is that's the nature of the practice that Jones Day has. We represent companies and individuals, and what I was involved in primarily is I was involved in the litigation side, which means that I would get involved in disputes, both mostly civil cases, but at times criminal cases, because one of the areas, my areas of expertise was what they call antitrust law, which is sometimes referred to in other countries as competition law. And what that deals with is like, if say people get together and they try to fix prices or they monopolize a market, you litigate over those cases. And it can be a crime in the United States too, which is why, yes.
How many cases did you do or like solve?
Oh, a lot. I mean, I can't count them. Although my practice was a little bit different than a lot of other lawyers. Mine was more what you would call a big case practice, where a lot of lawyers, like let's say people who are handling, insurance defense cases, where they're dealing with people who are in car accidents, they might have 100 cases on their docket, where they go from case to case, or some of the folks that may work in the prosecutor's office or the public defender's office may have a lot of cases. My practice was one where I generally worked on really big cases that just totally consumed me. For example, I spent a lot of time my last few years practicing in the international arena. I spent a lot of time in Japan. I was representing some Japanese companies and Japanese individuals in connection with first what was a big investigation that was conducted by the United States Justice Department of companies that sold auto parts to the car manufacturers. They were accused, these parts manufacturers were accused of getting together and colluding or agreeing with one another as to what the prices were going to be that were charged to the car companies, which resulted in the car companies paying a lot more for the cars they were making, and consumers having to pay more for the cars they were buying. And that's a crime in the United States. So it started off with an investigation by the US Justice Department. And I had Japanese clients, I had both, that were stated in writing. There are also what we call warranties. If you want a product to do a certain thing, if you want a bicycle that is a mountain bike, you want to put that in writing. You don't just imply it. There are circumstances where you have implied warranties, and I won't get into the details there. But if somebody ever, this is the last thing I just want to share with you, wants to sell you something and they say it's as is, that really is what it sounds like. it's as is. They sell you a car, and you drive that car down the street, and the engine falls out, you're out of luck. You don't have any claim against them. Or if you need to replace the carburetor right away, you don't have a claim against them if they sell it as is. As is means you get what you see, and you don't have any right to come back to me. And that's very common when you're talking about used cars, for example. So, yeah, that's why if you're buying a used car, you're better off taking it to your friendly mechanic and having them take a look at it before you make the deal. Because as is really does mean as is, and you're out of luck if you don't do that. If something goes wrong afterwards. Of course, you can always, hold somebody accountable if they lie to you. If they say that the car, if they tell you, my law firm, we generally work on an hourly basis, but if your arrangement with the client as a plaintiff is what we call a contingency fee, where you say they give me 25% or 30%, then they pay it. But in that circumstances, my client had to pay me no matter what, but they paid me less than a percentage of what they recovered. Yes. Okay, so one of the things, we had a contract, and then they had the right to inspect the house to make sure everything was okay. They made that a contingency. That is that in order for the contract to be binding, they wanted to make sure that there were no, significant defects in the house that needed to be addressed. We passed that. We were scheduled to finalize the sale 6 weeks after we signed the contract. My wife and I, since we no longer have kids in the house, our kids are all grown and adults. We were moving into a smaller house, a ranch. But when you get old, you like to be on ranches. You don't want to do the stairs that much. And we were selling some furniture. We had begun. We had actually signed a lease to go into an apartment because our other house was being built, so we had to have some place to live in the meantime. Then I get a call one day. These buyers were two doctors from the Detroit area. I get a call from a lawyer saying, "Hey, you know what? They really don't want to go through with this deal anymore." And you can imagine, I was not happy with that. We had just started to clear out our house. We had taken our house off the market. We had done so many things in reliance. When that lawyer called me, fortunately I was a lawyer and able to respond right away. I said, "No, that's not the deal here. Your clients agreed to buy this house," and there were doctors who said that they decided they didn't want to move to Cleveland, but that's not my fault. I had already relied on it. I said, "Sorry, you're gonna go through with the deal." And the lawyer on the other side recognized that his clients were bound by the contract. So then you get into a discussion of, well, what would it take for you to release them from their obligation? And because I really didn't want to do it, I didn't want to have to go through all that stuff again, I proposed a lot of money. I said, "You're gonna have to pay me. Let's just say a lot of money." And at that point, they said, "Oh, okay, we'll go through with buying the house." But one of the things that does happen is you do get into situations where people say they're not going to live up to the contractual obligation. And when that happens, you got to start off by having a frank, but you want to always try to keep it civil, because once it starts getting uncivil, it gets emotional, and people start doing stupid things at that point. You say, "Hey, look, you agreed to do this. You have a legal obligation to do it. You need to meet that legal obligation." And sometimes people will say, "Yeah, I guess so." It's not only a legal obligation, in my opinion, it's also a moral obligation. And actually we need people to comply with their contracts. Our economy couldn't exist if people